Welcome to the Do Good X podcast, a sanctuary from the entrepreneurial grind. Hosts Kimberly Danielle and Stephen Lewis, advocates for impactful entrepreneurship, guide you on the path where purpose meets business. Join us to slow down, reconnect, and explore the challenges of under-resourced entrepreneurs, uncovering the unique journey of building businesses that make a difference. Now, your host.
Welcome, everyone, to the Do Good X podcast. My name is Kimberly Danielle, and I am a community builder, a coach, and a communication strategist who comes from generations of faith-driven leaders and entrepreneurs who believe that our purpose should drive us to contribute to the common good. And as usual, I am here with my co-host, Stephen.
Hey, Kimberly, it's great to be with you. As you know, I am a catalyst for positive change in communities and businesses. And for over 2 decades, I've inspired leaders and entrepreneurs to live and work on purpose with intention, faith, and a commitment to their well-being. So I'm excited today because in today's episode, we're bringing back a previous guest who has much wisdom to share with early stage founders. If you missed last season's episode, Sweta works with ambitious professionals to validate their business ideas with the first 100 plus happy paying customers to de-risk their businesses. She is the creator of the Happy Paying Customers system, a proven approach that combines research-driven positioning, micro-testing, and a repeatable go-to-market playbook for $0 to $1 million stage. After 15 plus years operating inside startups, she now helps founders replace guesswork with clarity and proof backed by paying customers so that they can build a business that powers their dream life, not a gamble that burns them out. So again, welcome, Sweta.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to be back.
Yeah, so let us jump in. So you help founders get paying customers before they build. Now, for someone hearing that for the first time, what does it actually mean to validate a business idea without creating a full product or service yet?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oof, that's a lot to cover in one question. I'll break it down and you'll ask me follow up. So first things first, when we talk about validating an idea, one of the big kind of epiphanies that I had in working with hundreds of founders at this point was there's sort of this confusion or that was terms, those words, the word validate and idea cause, right? When we think validate, our brain kind of tricks us into thinking, I need to prove I'm right. So we forget that validate actually usually also means that in that process, it's a hypothesis that may actually be proven wrong. And that's actually more likely than unlikely, right? So that was one of my big realizations. And then the second part of it, which is I think directly connected to the question you asked, is the word idea, where what I found was a lot of founders would come to me after they've built their minimal viable product, or they've been, trying to get customers for something that sadly sometimes they had spent life savings on, or, we're talking tens, sometimes hundreds in the max that I've heard, thousands of dollars to build a solution because their brain tricked them into thinking in order to validate, because you're trying to validate an idea, I need to build this thing. And by then, it's already built on so many assumptions, right? Because we didn't really think through all the different components, all the different hypotheses that go into making a business happen, right? It became this idea that all of a sudden became all about the solution. And so that was sort of my big realization that when we talk about validating, we shouldn't be talking about really validating at all. We really should also be thinking about invalidating, because the likelihood that we're wrong is just too high. That's just the reality, and that's okay. And then we shouldn't focus on the idea, which usually is synonymous with the solution. We should instead focus on the problem, right? So this is the hill I die on, right? One of them. I always tell people, any friends and family, anybody who comes to me for advice, if you come up with an idea, the very first milestone every founder should work towards, and I've did the same thing in my business, everybody should do this in any business, is work towards deep clarity on whom do I solve what problem for. And particularly, I know most of your listeners are mission-driven founders, and so I think for that, one trap that I would caution you to avoid falling into is thinking just about the problem. Because, when we really care about our mission, we're thinking about doing something good in this world. And we forget that in order to do that, somebody has to pay to solve that problem. So it has to be the whom do I solve what problem for has to be the very first thing that you focus on figuring out. And that should be the milestone that every founder should work towards. And it's a lot harder than it might sound, depending on what your starting point is. But I'll pause there.
And so how long does it take to validate the answer to that question?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. What I've found is, and we can link out to this resource. I actually sat down and I did a sort of analysis of my portfolio and what was the starting point that founders came to me at. And I discovered that when we break down that question, right, whom do I solve what problem for? There's really only 4 possibilities. So one would be you have a lot of clarity and conviction on both sides, the who as well as the problem. The other is you kind of have a general idea, which is pretty common actually. And then the third and fourth are you have clarity about one, but you kind of have a vague idea or a general idea about the other. Those are the 4 permutations that are possible, right? And when you think about that, there's a direct correlation between how clear you are as your starting point versus and how long it will take you. So if you think about, what gets someone excited about and helps them come up with an idea, sometimes people are coming up with ideas because they have lived experience with the problem. They are their customer, or they have a ton of experience working with people and actually solving that problem for them. And so then they actually know exactly whom they want to solve what problem for. And the piece that they're working on is actually then just truly, they could say that they are validating that there's willingness to pay, that they can turn this into a real business. Those founders move way faster, right? Because now we're focused on getting one person to pay you. And if you use that paying customer system, you could really be getting someone to pay you in a matter of weeks, right? But if you're in the group where you're not sure yet, you have kind of a general idea, like I'll give you an example. A founder came to me and said, I have experience in risk management and I'd like to build a business in that space. That was it. That was the beginning point. Well, that's going to take a lot longer. Right now we're figuring out what are all the different types of businesses that may need risk management. Who would hire someone outside? What's her vision for success for the business? All right. Does she want it to be services? Does she want it to be product? What is realistic, right? There's so much more to figure out versus the more concrete and, and conviction, really, I think it is, which comes from experience, really. And that's okay. So I would say the biggest thing is, depending on where you are, the very first step I would say is do a self-assessment, be honest, like hand on heart, be honest with yourself about what your starting point is. You will figure it out, but you want to make sure that the actions you're taking align with what your starting point is, and you're figuring out the key puzzle pieces of your business as you go in the right order of operations, right? Versus trying to do everything all at once, and then you'll burn out, which is the worst. That's the most common reason people quit, right? Is we get tired because entrepreneurship is hard.
That's good. I really like you encouraging people to do that self-assessment, which is so important before people even kind of dive into this. Realistically, is this the path that is for them? And so that's really, really important. You mentioned minimum viable product earlier, or there's minimum viable solution, and we've talked about that before on this podcast. But how do you define what that is? And for people who tend to think that something has to be built, how do you help founders shift from building a product to designing something that really gets customer demand, gives them an experience that tests that particular demand?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. So I'll be honest, different founders come to me at different points. So that exact journey of what that looks like, that kind of like that epiphany of realizing, oh crap, this is what I need to prioritize in my business, looks a little different for everyone. But one of the things, and this is actually publicly available if you go to happypayingcustomers.com, there's a 5-stage kind of framework that I've put out, right? And when founders use that to do their self-assessment of where they are in their journey, I've seen that happen like almost instantly, where they'll realize, okay, hold on, whether I have an MVP or MVS or whether I just have an idea, when you're in that, so the very first stage, I should clarify, goes from idea to 100 plus happy paying customers. That's the journey. And it's broken up into 5 stages. And the first stage is a high bar, but it's getting someone to pay you. And that's a tough fail, right? So a lot of times people think I've already validated my idea because I've done all these different things. You've done a survey, a wait list, I talked to a bunch of people. I talked to my best friend. She thought it's a great idea. She's gone through it too. Like, we had a long chat. I can feel it. We all know how that goes, right? Like, we've seen the disappointment. And those aren't real ways of validating, right? Nothing is validated until someone pays you. And when we think about that, right? So it's actually, there are 2 stages. The first 2 stages both are required. It's a high bar, like I said, right? First is getting someone to pay you. And then the second is getting more like that first one. So it's not a fluke, right? Like, we want to make sure we're building a business here, right? It's not about a project, it's a business. We want a business, we need repeatability, replicability. So we need to make sure. And so when you think about that's the goal, this is going to sound contrary to it when I say it, but what I normally teach founders who I work with, which by the way, they're generally like super smart, ambitious people. This is like their second, third career by the time they're building a business. So it makes sense in this context. I'll tell them, find the laziest way to build the solution. Like, find the laziest way to solve the problem, right? So step 1 is figure out whom you solve what problem for, come up with the hypotheses for it. And then step 2 is get them to pay you to solve it. And so when you think about it from that perspective, where my goal is get someone to pay me versus, just to give you the contrast, right, that a lot of founders, I think, get brainwashed into from a lot of the generic startup advice that's out there. It's telling them, you need to think about scale. You need to think about this big thing, right? And so we put pressure on ourselves to build this perfect solution, but we don't even know if someone cares about solving that problem and is willing to pay for it. So if we go in that order of operations, right, come up with our hypotheses for whom you want to solve a problem for, validate it by getting them to pay you, and you'll figure out the laziest way to solve that. I know it sounds bad. It's not meant to be. It's truly meant to be an empowering thing and free you of this burden of figuring it all out overnight, right? Because that's fiction. That doesn't work that way anyway. And usually, honestly, it ends up being some kind of service, or it ends up being some kind of combination of, like for data-driven products, right? If it's a report or something like that, you could have a prototype. So you design it, you have a prototype, and you tell them, this is what it's going to be. If you're in, all you need to do is give me your data or give me X file, and we'll build this for you, right? And then you're doing it manual. It's a combination of design, and now we have no-code tools, which are phenomenal, right? So most of the founders in my portfolio now are all just using no-code tools at this point to build out basic MVPs. But you start, it's all about the order of operations. I think that has been my biggest takeaway in seeing founders who are able to make progress and keep going versus the ones who burn out. It's stick with figuring out whom you solve what problem for, get them to pay you, and then we'll figure out the scalable stuff later. Which is hard, right? It's the opposite, I think, of common advice.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I mean, it's such simple, practical advice. And I think that's really great. That's really important in a field where people just kind of bombarded with so much information. So let me ask you this. What's the most common mistake that founders make when creating their MVS or MVP? And what should they be doing instead to reduce their risk?
Oh my gosh, for sure. It's building too early. It's the easiest. It's for sure. It's the easy thing. And I will tell you honestly that I think I will admit, I laugh, but at the same time, honestly, I think there's a lot of psychology involved in that, right? So I've had founders tell me, well, Sweta, how can I get someone to pay me if I don't have this perfect solution? I feel bad about asking someone, right? So there's so much, we put all this pressure on ourselves, right? Like, especially if you're coming from corporate, think about the bar that you're expected to operate at in order to get a promotion, in order to be successful. It's so different. That mindset is so different when you're building a business. So it just takes some work. This is not to say, I totally understand where that comes from. So from what I've noticed, I think in coaching founders, that mindset shift that helps is really grounding ourselves in, if I begin with understanding, right, like me as the founder, begin with understanding what is the problem that my dream customers are facing, and I try to figure out the combination of the two, and then it really becomes more of a conversation. There's a specific kind of methodology I use called research sales calls. In the beginning, those conversations are more researchy, right? You're asking them about their problem. How are you solving the problem currently? How much, obviously you don't directly ask this, but you're trying to suss out how much money do you spend on solving this problem, right? And eventually you start getting, I call it building a bridge. You build a bridge over, as you get into your 10th, 20th conversation, you start to find the patterns. They start repeating the same stories. And so now you get to a point where you can actually build a bridge and start thinking about, okay, well, what if I solve this problem for you tomorrow? Right? Like, this is it. I actually have the solution for it. Right? You come up with the way to build the bridge and say, hey, I'm hearing you have this problem. You've tried X, Y, and Z. This is what's at stake if you don't solve it. None of the things you've tried have worked. This seems important to you. And then you pitch, you build the bridge, right? That's your bridge, and you pitch it. You pitch the thing that you want to do, and you wait, and you sell. And that's tough because it sounds like you're selling before you have something. But if you frame it as, I am offering to help you solve the problem that you just spent 30 minutes telling me you have, like that, for me too, I don't have a sales background. I hate sales. It felt so awkward to me. So for me too, personally, it was so empowering to think, oh my gosh, I can help you with that, right? Like, isn't that what we're all trying to do as entrepreneurs? We want to help. And that feels so good. So I would say that's the most important thing, is find the right people to talk to who feel like they could be your dream customers, understand their problem, and find that spark in yourself. Like, find that moment when you just think, yes, I can solve this, right? Like, it's what you said, right, Stephen? It's intentionally simple, right? Because there's so many complicated frameworks out there, but I truly believe entrepreneurship is a deeply personal thing, and it has to come from within, right? And so instead of trying to fabricate this thing, just focus on whom I want to solve problem for, and can I get them to pay me? That's it. That's it. That's the only mission you need to go on. Like, that's the game. If you figure it out, the rest begins to fall into place, right?
And that mindset that you talked about is very important for folks, for founders who are just starting out in this process of validation or invalidation. As it pertains to founders who are, so say they're out testing, they're out having these conversations, and they reveal low interest, or their idea just doesn't get any traction, or the traction that they expected. How do they then know whether to pivot, to persevere, to pause, to stop?
Oh my gosh. That is such a tough question. Honestly, I think, again, right, entrepreneurship is so personal. I would say, again, honestly, this is much more mindset based answers than I expected. But I've seen it over and over again, right? First of all, we should all expect for that to happen. We should expect that things will not go. The thing that we should expect is that it won't play out exactly as we have it laid out, right? Whatever your first version is not how it's going to play out. Even your hypotheses around whom I solve what problem for, even that will play out differently, right? Like that's just the reality. And just to give you, there's so many examples, but the one that pops up in my head is Slack. I feel like Slack is a pretty popular tool that most people know, right?
Mhm.
And now we know it as an internal communication, team communication tool. Well, they're trying to brand themselves as productivity. I still think it's mainly communication, but they started off as a gaming company. That's like such a massive pivot, right? And when we think about, and this is true, by the way, for so many of the startups that we know, not everyone is that drastic. I think that was probably one of the more drastic stories, but this is pretty common. So I would say like, and this is why, even if you follow what I'm explaining, right? If you don't invest too much into building your solution, you will give yourself the time and space to figure it out as you go on an iterative process. Versus if you go all in, build the thing, now you've invested time, money, energy, right? Like we all have limited runway for all of that. And then you might burn out. So instead, if you focus on it step by step in the order of operations, the likelihood that you get to that kind of feeling of, I just need to give up, just goes down drastically. But it will happen. It inevitably can happen. And at least in my portfolio, the most common thing I've noticed, the most common reason is founders discover one of two things. One is they discover that they need to change something. And either they discover that what they need to change is sort of like a whole different business, which happens. And I love those stories. I think those are awesome. They go out and start a whole new business. Or they discover what they need to change isn't actually in keeping with what they want to do. It doesn't align with their life's purpose, or it doesn't align with what they're able to do with the time that they had allotted to building a business, right? Like we have to pay bills. You may need to go back to work for a bit and come back to entrepreneurship later, right? So honestly, it's one of those two things is what I've noticed is either you're going to be able to continue to iterate because you know that you need to and you're happy with what you need to iterate, or it's going to be one of those two drastic things. And then you know that you're going to go out and build a new business, or you're going to pause for a bit. And that's okay. You'll come back to it when you're ready. That's okay.
That's good.
It's just honest.
No, that's
I
good.
appreciate the
Yeah, I
honesty.
mean, yeah, that's good. What does it really take, both practically and internally, for a founder to know that, it's really time to take a leap of faith and to build my business full time?
Oh my gosh. Okay. First of all, I love this question because it's implied that you don't necessarily need to take the leap in order to pursue your idea, which I love. So many people do that. It breaks my heart, right? Because your time starts, right? It's the amount of time that you can allocate to building a business begins the day you quit your job. So I'm glad you framed it that way, Stephen. That's genius. I absolutely agree with that. I would say for me, by far, and I also say this, I'm thinking about several people in my life who I'm giving the same advice to. I have founders in my portfolio, but also friends and family that I'm working with on this. And I always tell everyone the same thing. Just try to figure out two big things about before you quit. One, it's a big bucket, but on a high level, figure out your vision for success for your business. Figure out what do you absolutely needed to do year one versus what you needed to do by year 5. And that way, the year 5 part is mostly to help you figure out what to prioritize for year 1 versus what can wait till year 5, right? And that gives you deep clarity into kind of the parameters you're setting for your business. So this could be the type of people you want to deal with versus not deal with, the type of problems you're excited to solve versus not. It's the type of like business models that you think you'd be good at versus not. What does it mean? Do you want to raise money ever? In the beginning, later, never, right? Like all these really big questions. What impact are you okay with that having on your life? Because it will have an impact. What are the boundaries, right? What do you need to discuss with your family, your significant other, right? How is it going to impact your wealth creation strategy, right? You won't be making money for a bit. What will that mean for your life? All those things you need to have figured out. You need to have an honest answer to what your parameters are. And that it's supposed to be a positive thing. It's meant to be, when you do that, you can now actually basically say, these are my terms. This business needs to meet these terms, right? And that actually really helps, especially when founders come to me. I actually force them to do this. That's the first step everyone does. We don't do anything else before we set these. And it's so helpful because now I can give you advice and I can tell you, hey, listen, you told me you really need to make generate X, Y, and Z revenue by ABC deadline. But the business model you're pursuing usually takes 12 months to get traction. That doesn't align. Which one are you willing to give up on? Right? Like we can have these honest conversations and we can then figure out the right business for you. And whether it's me or anyone else, right? Like having that clarity, that's the piece. And then the second piece is what we've been talking about, right? Is really try to get clarity on whom you want to solve what problem for. And start having those conversations with those people. Go embed yourself in the world where they hang out. Go hang out in the communities. Go to events they go to. Show up in the associations that they're part of. And try to get, run those research sales calls and get that first paying customer. To me, as soon as you have these two things, I promise there's that spark and conviction and clarity that I see in founders that's unmatched. Like I have goosebumps as I say, because you can feel it, because you can tell from the inside, like you feel so much power when you have that clarity and conviction, right? Of this is the business I'm building for myself, and this is the impact it's going to have in the world. That's so powerful.
That's great. I mean, again, these are very practical kind of insights, and I think can go a long way for helping our listeners who are tuning in to this episode. So let me just make a shift and say, it's time for our resource roundup, where we gather tools and tips and resources that can help entrepreneurs build strong and sustainable businesses. So we will get started with this first question, which are for someone who wants to validate an idea but feels overwhelmed, what is the smallest next step that they can take today to build confidence and proof?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have to send you the link to this article. It's publicly available. And it basically looks at those 4 starting points that I talked about. And depending on your starting point, it tells you what your action item should be. So we'll link out to that. But I will say the most important takeaway, honestly, from if you're listening to this, should be figure out the right thing you should do based on the stage that you're at. That's the key takeaway. So as you read that article, you'll see kind of the 4 starting points. You'll assess, and then you'll have the action items. So for example, if you have deep clarity and conviction on whom you want to solve, the problem for, like you're excited about a specific customer type, a lot of people have that, right? Like they'll say, I really want to help, working moms who live in cities or something like that, or X, Y, and Z type of businesses, because that's what my background is in. That's great. Then now your action item becomes to figure out the other part of the puzzle, which is the problem, right? So that's a straightforward answer there. And then depending on which of the other puzzle pieces you have clarity or general idea on, you'll do a different next step. But don't follow generic advice. Do what makes sense for where you are right now.
What are the first 2 to 3 steps that you recommend for finding early paying customers, especially for founders who may not have an audience or email list or anything like that? How would they get started?
Oh my gosh. A couple things. So one, definitely, again, everything comes back to this, right? Is you have to have some hypotheses on whom you want to solve what problem for. And this is where the who part of it becomes really important. So the second step would be, I sort of alluded to it earlier, is really embed yourself in their world. And in today's day, I would say the most common places to do that would be find the influencers on different social media platforms that they follow and engage with. So you can actually hang out in their comments section and see what they're saying. Great listening tool. And then the second one is don't be shy to join private communities. Those are a gold mine, because that's where these people are having conversations with their peers that they're probably not posting about publicly, right? So those are a gold mine. Sometimes they're paid. That's okay. And you may have to do a little bit of work. to kind of follow the trail of content and figuring it out. And that should be your first mission. That's fine, but you'll figure it out. And as soon as you do, now you will have embedded yourself in their world. And then the next step would be to run research sales calls, right? Where you're now finding those people who may be a good fit. You reach out to them, you get them on the call, and you follow that playbook to get them understand their problem, and then building the bridge over to sales, right? But first step, absolutely, is embed yourself in their world. And you might honestly end up deciding that if you have idea for like 3 or 4 customers, you may end up eliminating a bunch of them just from the listening part, right? Because you learn a lot that way.
That's great. So there's so many vanity metrics online, and you've talked a little bit about this in terms of making your first sale and then figure out how you scale it. But what signals actually matter doing validation, and which ones should founders ignore?
Oh my gosh. Okay. By far, the one that I always go after, and this applies throughout, by the way, the entire kind of the 5 stages of attraction that I talked about, is pinned to the number of happy paying customers you have. So it goes from 1 to 10 to 20 to 100. So by far a growing number of happy paying customers. And the reason I say that is because it covers happy paying and customers. So you're talking holistically about acquiring them, retaining them, monetizing them, right? So you're thinking holistically, but at the very earliest stages, honestly, there's also a lot of qualitative signals that you have to pay attention to, right? So when you're on a call with someone and you're trying to figure out, is this someone that I should maybe pitch something to, right? Look out for like physical signals, right? Of them getting excited. Like you can feel like, oh my gosh, this person really feels this pain. They're talking about all these things that they've tried, right? So look for those signals around which type of customer is already solving this problem and is not satisfied with whatever the status quo is, right? That's a lot that I just said, but it's truly really important. It's the first thing you should be looking for when you're having these conversations, right? You're trying to understand, what is your problem? If the answer is I'm not solving it, ignore them. You should be doing something about it, right? Because imagine trying to convince someone that a problem is a priority for them on top of everything else they have going on in life, right? That's already going to take you too much time, months at least, right? That's too long. So try to find the customer segment that shows you that literally cannot stop talking about the problem and the solution and what they've tried and how they're irritated by it, right? That's a really good signal in the early days. That's gold. Like the moment you find people complaining, but not just complaining for complaining's sake, they have to be doing something about it. This is a huge one. That's huge. That's when you know you're onto something and you should try to figure out the solution for them and pitch that to them. So earliest days, that qualitative stuff is pretty important.
You've provided so many practical things that people can consider from, next steps to questions, or even the self-reflection that I think is so important. So I hope if you are tuning in that you have written down or mentally taken some notes of these practical tips and next steps that you can take toward validation or invalidation. And what I also love is that you talk about the importance of listening and observing, not just listening, but observing in order to move forward. For those of you who are tuning in, if this conversation is really sparking something for you, we invite you to check out dogoodx.org. You'll find community and simple tools you can use and you can explore to really help support your idea for good. Now, we are going to shift to this last piece off the cuff. Now, when you joined us last season, we did something similar, but this time, Sweta, of course, we have different questions for you. Now, we do have 2 that are the same, and I'm curious to see what your response will be this season because life and business changes. But we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, these are just some rapid questions that Stephen and I always ask our guests to hear the first thing that comes top of mind for you. So first, what practices do you turn to in order to be resilient in the face of adversity, especially?
Oof. Oh my gosh. What type of adversity? Oh my, that's so hard. My gosh. I would say I'm an external processor by an extreme. So talking it out with people I trust. Whatever it is, it will start with talking it out. I cannot process anything without having my people.
All right. So then what is one of your superpowers? A gift that you bring to the world?
Ooh, getting people to open up.
Hmm.
How has your faith shaped the way that you lead or build your business?
Oh my gosh. So much. I think my entire business model and even concept is influenced by this idea of wanting to do the right thing for the type of founders that I'm excited to support. It's, yeah, I would say the entire thing. Even when I got started, actually, many people told me don't try to go focus on the idea stage founders that were stage to focus on. But that's where I know there's a need and there's so much bad advice out there. And so I wanted to fix it. So staying true to the who of what I wanted, who I wanted to help, understanding the problem. And then I think what I've come up with in my business, my offers, everything is not what I ever could have imagined. Frankly, I've applied my own methodology to my business, right? But I stayed grounded in whom I want to solve what problem for. And I think that all comes from everything that I believe in my entire belief system of trying to do the right thing in the world.
So what's one deep wisdom that you have discovered as a result of helping others build their MVS or MVP?
Oh my gosh. Deep empathy. It's so hard. It's so hard. I think it's a combination of building a business that focuses on helping other people building a business, like the two together. There's a lot of, I'm a very logical, practical person. And I think the biggest takeaway for me, the biggest learning was embracing the uncertainty, the ups and downs, the mindset work that's needed, the emotional aspects that come with it, and dealing with that. It's definitely been the one that took me by surprise the most.
How much of your success do you attribute to your faith versus your own grit, will, and hustle?
Ooh. Everything to faith, I think. If I also don't like the term hustle. So hustle is definitely not it. Grit for sure, I think is important, but grit is also part of my faith. So it's what I was taught. But hustle.
Good.
Yeah.
So complete this sentence. Because of my entrepreneurial endeavor, businesses and communities will be or are more able to.
Ooh. I always think of it more from the perspective of the individuals. That's a hard one for me. Let's see. Oof, I can't finish that sentence. I have to just think, my brain is blocked now. But I think of it as from the entrepreneur's perspective, right? And being able to support entrepreneurs in building businesses that are powered by their own happy paying customers and hence being able to build a business on their terms. So from a community standpoint, I see it as just having all these founders who've built businesses on their terms. To me, that's inspiring.
Well, Sweta, you are inspiring. And with that, as always, we're thankful for you taking time of your schedule to share a little bit more wisdom and to demythicize this whole idea about what it takes to actually build an entrepreneurial dream. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you so
Yes.
much for having me.
Thank you. You bring so much light and joy and passion to this work. And especially, I commend you on staying truly committed to that customer that you have, even
Mhm.
when everyone else said no, because you are inspiring them and you are making a positive impact for them toward their 100 happy paying customers. So thank you again so much. And for you all tuning in, we hope that you have gleaned some jewels and wisdom from this episode, especially if you are in the early stages of your business, or even if you have an established business, but you're thinking about launching something else, this still applies. But continue to journey with us. We hope that you will be with us on the next episode. And until then, be well and do good.
Thank you for listening to the Do Good X podcast. To continue the conversation or access our resources, visit www.dogoodx.org. Join us again for conversations that will nourish your soul, ignite your dreams, and empower you to build an impactful business, one intentional step at a time. Until then, keep striving, thriving, and doing good.